Yes. Oh, wait, he's not here. Yes, it was Ralph. We are live.
I'm going to call this meeting to order. We get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mayor Larry Milton,
Yes.
Acting City Attorney, City Administrator, Lisa Westfall,
Here.
Alderman Chuck Rodriguez,
Here.
Kevin McConnell,
Here.
Lane McConnell.
Yes.
Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We will start our agenda off with a staff report from Jan.
Mayor, the first thing I want to kind of point out is that for whatever reason, and this is my bad, that we did not include the minutes for the last meeting on this agenda. So next time when we meet, we'll do a double minute thing. So
That's fine.
that was my mistake. I apologize for that. I want to talk on the first part on the 2022 American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA Act, the stipend options. Ben Hart from Baker Tilly had made the recommendation that we bring this to the HR committee since it's more of an employee issue. If you don't recall, last November, the city made the decision to use those funds to help employees with keep up with inflation and things like that, other incidental costs, and to kind of reward folks for all the effort they did during the COVID pandemic in making sure that they, were able to support all the activities that help keep the city going and things like that during those troubled times. The breakdown of how we did it at that point was 10%. It was broken down in such a way that the public safety employees got a 10% stipend, 10% of their annual salary. They got that in a stipend. And then everybody else got a 5%. There was some feedback, obviously, from staff that, not quite understanding the equity and things like that. The one thing that I want to be very clear about is I think it's very important that we recognize that the first responders that go out there, they were dealing with COVID patients on a regular basis. Many of those guys got sick, firefighters and police officers themselves, based primarily on their exposure to these folks. So in that respect, I think the concept was a very good one. I think there's some tweaking that could have taken place. I think we just kind of did a one-size-fits-all. But we wanted just to bring options to this committee for your review so you can make recommendations to the Board of Aldermen. I stay pretty much apolitical on this. I think there's one of those, you can argue it in every direction you want. Should everybody get the same stipend? That's your call. Should certain groups get a little more than another group? That's your call again. That's one of those things that I'll look to you for guidance to make recommendations to the Board of Aldermen. So that being said, this year we're looking at, we have about the same amount of money that we received last time. $1.173 million. What we did is we went through and we developed 7 different scenarios. They go from easy to convoluted and difficult to understand. So just to try to make it equitable for everybody. We did our calculations based on the payroll of August 18th. So understand this is a pretty close estimate. It's pretty accurate. We will have additions and subtractions to that. We will have employees who've left employment. We will have people we've brought on board in between that date when they were calculated and whenever we actually pull the trigger on issuing these payments. That being said, and there's other issues, there could be, like performance evaluations along the way where someone gets an evaluation after this, this calculation was done, to then, at that point, their stipend could be more, you know, what that allocation, whatever that percentage would be. We've done it to a certain degree on most of these based on percentages, so that, I mean, that makes it easy to calculate in some respects. We can do it any way we want to. We can do percentages, we can do flat amounts and things like that. What you will see in here on some of the options is that we have percentages up to a certain point, and then we cap it at a certain amount, whatever that may be. So anyhow, I'll walk through some of the options that we have here and get your input, and we'll go from there. Okay, so option one, the premise behind that was to have a 10% payout for public safety staff, 7% for others, with a $5,000 cap on all stipends, except for the first responders. The differentiation with that means those people on the front line, they would get a full 10%. So in some respects, you know, like if you're looking at an entry-level firefighter, an entry-level police officer, 10% stipend would be $4,800, something in that range. Someone who is not necessarily a first responder, someone in an office, code enforcement, or something like that, that doesn't go to emergency calls, things like that, typically. And I'm generalizing, so bear with me on that. I'm sure there's going to be arguments both ways, but somebody, like if they were making, you know, $55,000, it might be capped at $5,000 then. It wouldn't be the full 10%, it would be 9 point something or 8 point something %, up to that cap. That enables you to spread the wealth a little more. That the part that I like about that is the one thing we did not take into consideration the first round were the folks, the plant operators, those folks that had to be here 24/7 as well. Those are the things that we, you know, that's some of the feedback we heard along the way, that there was a differentiation between the first responders and them. And so this brings it a little more in line with a little more equity, if you will. The one thing that we did whenever we made our calculations, Crystal McDaniel, our payroll person, she did all of the payroll information here. She included loggers and FICA in that because that's an expense to the city as well. Loggers, based on whatever the department is going to vary. Like police and fire have two different rates. Everybody else, the general employee base, has 14.5%. And that's a significant chunk that has to go in, that has to be paid, that would otherwise be a cost to the whatever fund it comes from. That being said, and FICA is in that same boat, 7.65%.
Excuse me, Jen, when we paid this out last year, was the calculation based on including loggers, FICA?
I think so, but I don't know definitively.
I'm not sure either on that, because that transfer just had the fund amount, the dollar amount in it.
Okay.
So it didn't stipulate if it had what to included in that amount.
Okay.
I can find out, though. Yeah. So that's, and as it sits, under that scenario, based on the calculations we've got, that spend would be about $1.26 million, which would be $92,000 more than the ARPA funds have been allocated. So we'd have to find those additional monies to feather that out to begin with in that respect. We've got option two with 10% public safety, 7.5%, with a $5,000 max on higher salaried employees. Those calculations, in as much as you see that 7.5% it looks different than the previous one, the calculations, when you get into making the sausage, there's fewer high-end salaries getting the bigger percentages. Because in some situations, you know, some of the high-end public safety salaries could get into the 5 digits in some respects. So, and again, that is a little over 100,000, 122,000 more than the ARPA funds, going that calculation. The option 3 is that 10% public safety, 5% others, with a 5% max on directors and assistant directors. This is the one that most closely reflects what we were supposed to have from the last time. The issue, part of the issue is that there are some folks who are lower level in their department. They are not assistant directors, but are paid more than some assistant directors. So the assistant directors at a lower pay would get a lower stipend, and the lower level employees with the higher pay would get a bigger stipend. So that was one of the inequities that was kind of pointed out from the last time that we had. Option 4 is kind of a basic straight across the board, 10% public safety, 5% everybody else. And the way we did it with including the loggers and FICA, it's just a little bit more than what the ARPA funds allocated. I think, again, this goes into similar to what we had last time. We had to go find money in other places to level that out. Option 5 it's across the board, 7% for all. And again, that includes loggers and FICA. That ends up being about $44,000 less than the ARPA funds that are available. That's just giving everybody the same percentage across the board, not a flat amount, but just a percentage. Option 6 is 5% for all. That gets into a bigger savings, so that if we wanted to do something with that additional $300,000, we could do that. If we wanted to allocate, as an example, if we wanted to say, let's establish a basis for self-funding on our insurance, something like that, we could use some of those dollars in that respect. And then the last one, this is the one that gets really convoluted. It's 10% for first responders up to a $5,500 cap, 7.5% for field-related employees up to a $5,250 cap, 5% for office employees, including public safety administration, up to a $5,000 cap. And all of this includes loggers and FICA, and that ends up being about $6,000 less than our ARPA funds. What that does is that kind of levels the playing field for those people that work in the field, and that includes Parks and Rec, utilities, Public Works, those people that were actually out in the field on a regular basis and didn't have a rotation staying at home and things like that during the pandemic time. So those are 7 options that we've got, and I'll throw it out there and for a discussion for you folks to talk about.
One, and I think it may be important for us to make this decision if we knew if last year's calculation included loggers and FICA. Obviously, all of these do include loggers. Because I would assume with or without the loggers FICA addition last year would make a significant difference on the numbers we're looking at this year. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, yeah. There's, 14.5% for the general fund employees. I forget exactly the percentages for fire and police, but police is a higher percentage as well.
Excuse me. I'm looking at that staff report and ordinance from last year, and I'm just seeing gross. It's just, that's the only reference there is, gross wages.
When it says gross, does that include,
It's a good question. I think
Chad?
I know that gets your answer. I'm not sure that that's still your answer.
When you say include or not include, what, another, I remember when that stipend came through, it was, say, 5% of your salary, and then they took everything out of that, and you got less what everything else was taken out, FICA, this, that. So when you say include or exclude, I guess I can tell you, and anybody correct me if I'm wrong, you got 5% or 10%, and then FICA and loggers was taken out of that. So whatever, if you thought you were, you know, if you're getting, say you thought you were getting $5,000, you're going to get fairly significantly less than that after everything's taken out. Not that we're not appreciative, that's how the calculations worked out and what they did. Does anybody disagree with that?
Which would be correct, but then that would, the effect on this would be what the city side is.
Right.
So that's the effect on
Yeah.
on those numbers, it's the city side. So the city matches and have a percent and all that on those. So that is where it would affect on that.
Yeah, the employees are still going to pay 4% for loggers and 7.65% for FICA. They still pay that irrespective of what the city side is.
yeah. Okay, so to recap, you're suggesting option number 3 is the closest option up there to what we actually did last year.
I believe so, yes.
And your suggestions for options 1 and 2 is taking into consideration the feedback that you've received from employees based on how it was allocated last year.
Right. Yeah, part of it had to do with, like in police and fire, the senior level staff, that percentage being significant. The office staff getting the same 10%, that kind of thing. Those are obviously it's one of those, well, hey, why did they get it and I didn't? I have an office function, they have an office function. Why do I get 5%? Why do they get 10%?
Sure.
So anyhow.
Question?
I
Go ahead.
can, I can say that the way the ordinance, and I have it, we could put it up if you want to see last year's, but it was moved straight for public safety. It was a flat amount moved over. So it was just moved into that public safety account, the dollar amount. And the other ones for all the other funds.
Okay, well, I know at a minimum, and I'll ask the board their opinion, I wouldn't want to do anything less than we did last year, because as I recall, last year during all of these discussions, the board agreed that what we're going to do last year, we were going to do this year. So I wouldn't want to go back on any promises that the board made to
Okay.
our employees. Anybody have a different opinion on that? Yeah, Kevin.
I just have a question. It might be a dumb question. I wasn't involved in the process last year. My question, Jan, was going to be, do you feel like, as I'm processing this, I'm thinking, okay, the first thing I think of is those difficult positions to fill, those areas of high turnover, those areas where we're maybe not as competitive, those kinds of things. And then my mind shifted to say, does this sort of one time a year, very temporary, due to COVID relief and all that, do you feel as an HR director that there is a correlation between how this is allocated and how it could affect the very important issues such as turnover or attracting new employees? And if so, then I think through that lens, it's important to realize that. And then I have to say, and it's a terribly unpopular thing to say, but I have to say it, I'll be the only person up here with this opinion, I'm certain. But when you talked about the leftover percentages that could go to self-funding, and something that could really affect our employee base for decades to come, and to help us get in a position as a city to be able to manage and recoup those dollars from insurance claims, and the fact that our claims are much less than what our premiums are, my God, that'd be my vote. Like, and I know that's wholly unpopular, and I get it. Whatever was promised, I can't speak to that because I'm not a politician. I didn't promise anything, but I'm just saying, as a city in the big picture, is there a percentage? So the first question is, do you feel like this is tied and it would really impact turnover? And the second question is, how much of a percentage of these dollars, which could seriously get you in your way of self-funding, could you actually allocate to self-funding?
Well, I will say, as far as the first part of the question is targeted towards employee retention and turnover, I think focusing on how we did it last year, we would be then rewarding the longer-term employees and not the shorter-term employees. That in itself has its positives, but it doesn't do a whole lot, like in the entry-level firefighter positions. A lot of those are going to be $4,000, $4,500 stipends, if you will. Those are significant, and I think that will help. I think where we really struggle is going to be like in parks and utilities and public works, where they would get a 5% stipend, and it's not that it's not significant, but there's a big difference between a $1,500, $2,000 stipend and a $4,500, $5,000 stipend. Big difference in that respect, because you're going to kiss 40% of that goodbye to taxes and things like that. So the real buying power is going to be much less for those where, like in the fire department, we don't have significant turnover. Public works, utilities, we do. And so in that respect, it has, it would help shore up and keep those, help with retention. It's not going to help a whole lot with attraction.
Bob, you have a comment?
I can confirm that the stipend amount last year also included FICA and loggers.
Thank you very much for doing that. Kevin's your question answered?
Yes, so that, and I appreciate that, Gene. You really answered the first question, and so I'll sort of withdraw my second. I'd rather not know now how much could go towards self-funding. If you really feel like it would help with reducing turnover and things like that, that's so important.
And
So
I didn't mean to avoid the question.
Oh, no, like I said, I withdraw.
But, the one thing that, when it comes to self-funding, your biggest issues are going to be how do you cover your costs that you incur in your first couple of months? Once you flip over to going from fully insured over to self-funded, you've got an exposure period where you just don't have a lot of money banked up, because if you've got claims from the prior year coverage will take care of that. But like a claim on January 1, like we had a significant insurance claim 2020, February of 2020, and that was one of those, like, had we been self-funded at that point, we would have really needed to have a big bank set up at that point. So to your point, I would think $200,000 to $300,000 would be a minimum I'd want to look at with respect to getting started with self-funded.
And none of these have that kind of leftover.
The one does. It's got 366, but then again, that puts you in the realm of you're not doing what you did last year. And that's the part, to the mayor's point, I think. If the promise was made, I think it is important to keep the promise.
Lane?
I have to agree, I mean, if you promise something to employees, and performance evaluations come in and they're still meeting their expectations. My question is, on some of these, it's more than our funds. So with those, where in our budget, where does that come from? And I'm new to this committee too, so.
It comes from various places where they may have a reserve set up that, you know, like in the general fund, things like that, where you're not talking a significant amount of dollars. And I believe public safety also has a reserve set up. So I don't know how it came out of last year. I would presume that they would do a budget amendment that would affect that and say, let's move this forward and lower that reserve slightly.
For clarity, Jan, so what you're saying is last year we had we had an ARPA dollar amount. And are you saying that last year, when the funds were dispersed, we exceeded the ARPA amount we had last year?
Based on my understanding, yes, we did. And we went and got the money in other places. You know, any way we look at this, these are dollars that are not budgeted, so we will have to do a budget amendment
Sure.
one way or the other.
Are we competitive right now for our, like, these positions with other cities, is my question? Just knowing the time that we live in and wanting to attract good employees that have good tenure. Are we, like, at a place where we're competitive right now?
We're getting there. We're not as competitive as we need to be. You know, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when we go into the staffing study part of things. But, you know, most of the data that we've got right now reflects with other municipalities and things like that. That's not where we're losing people. We're losing people to private industry. And, you know, like an equipment operator, too, for the city of Branson may make $18, $19 an hour. He can make closer to $30 an hour out in the public sector. So that's what we're competing with.
Is there, in the staffing study, and I'm sorry, is there going to be, like, is there a general percentage that we know of how far we're off on some of these positions, like public safety and some of the others?
Yeah, we will have those calculations wrapped up here shortly.
I need to ask the question because I anticipate the public will be asking. When these calculations were done last year, based on the salaries, and we're comparing it to this year, we do have 3 high-paid positions last year that we do not have this year. So just at a surface level, it would appear that we would have more dollars this year to allocate versus last year.
From an overall perspective, I would say that lends to that being a reasonable assumption, you know, without seeing what the actual dollars were last year. I can't say definitively, but yeah, we are down city administrator, assistant city administrator, city attorney, finance director right now. It's 4 positions right there. And then we've got others throughout. You know, we experienced turnover in various departments. We've got quite a number of open positions right now that, you know, the premise is we pay the stipends to those who are currently employed with the city. And so in that respect, turnover has an effect on that. And Sonia, how many positions do we currently have open right now? We have 36 positions open. So that's a significant number right there.
So those 4 positions that he was talking about, that's just roughly $40,000 to $60,000, right? In stipend money? So it's not a significantly large amount.
No, it's not huge, but it is, I mean, all things considered, it would be enough to fund 9 or 10 entry-level police officers.
Looking at your options there, I mean, I don't know what was promised last year as far as what's going to happen this year, but option 7, I mean, looks like the most fair thing out there, especially when you have field-related employees out there that are in contact with people just like the first responders. To give them a little bit more makes sense to me. That would be my choice.
That's one where, you know, in some respects, you know, the police and fire folks, again, they do admirable work and things, but they're high profile, relatively speaking. And our public works, our utilities, our, parks department, they're not high profile. And I just wanted to make sure that we remembered them in the whole mix of things.
And Chuck, option 7 really does go against what we promised last year. It was on the public safety. We did not cap them. And so last year, we would have said you get X, and this year you get X less.
But don't we, by definition, have to go above the funds again to keep that promise? If we do the same thing we did last year and we went above the ARPA funds, do we not have to do that now or no?
Yeah, let's clarify that.
Okay.
Jan, you said, would you scroll down just a little bit so we can see 1 and 2? Jan, you're saying that option 3 is the closest we did last year.
Well,
The difference between 3 and 1 is we're allocating more funds for those that are, we're allocating more to those than we did last year out of the discussions you've had with employees as far as the fairness.
right. It still keeps all of public safety at 10%. And it does 7% for others. It does have, option 1 does have a cap on it. So that would, there's going to be some first responders, like a captain, if you will, would probably cap out at $5,000, that kind of thing. So if that's off the board, then we probably need to look at option 4. Option 4 would be essentially just across the board. It would be a replication of what we did last year. It would be that where office staff in public safety would get the 10% as well.
But there's no max.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so option 4 would be closest to what we did last year. However, it does not take into consideration the 7% increase as you have in option 1, which is from the feedback you've received for the other employees. So this is probably an unfair question. And I don't know how long it would take to do the calculation. But if we went with option 4 and included the 7% for others instead of 5% for others with no cap.
Okay. I could calculate that fairly quickly. I mean, I've got the data set on my computer, and it's just a matter of throwing in percentages, and it's not difficult to do.
I'm just making sure, so you have a different, like in 7, you talk about office employees, first responders, field-related employees, and then up here, it's just public safety and others. I'm just making sure, like, on both of those, on the others, we're still including those from 7, right?
Right.
Okay.
I can go back and do some other calculations, and I'd be happy to share it with you. Those are, I think our goal would be to make a recommendation fairly shortly. We had anticipated another meeting in a couple of weeks, or next week. I can put that together and have it ready for then.
Well, I'll tell you, I feel pretty strong that I would not want to take a penny away from what we promised last year, because I believe certain decisions were made this year, regardless of what department you're in. When they hired in, they were hired in based on the directors were told that when they hire somebody in prior to this disbursement, that they're going to be included X number of dollars. And there's no way we can go back on that,
Okay.
right? But I'm also very sensitive to the fact, that's why I'd like to see what that number would be on option 4 if we adjusted that 5% to others to 7% to others for the reasons that you've mentioned.
I honestly think option 2 would probably be closest to that.
But it has the cap in there.
Well, but it's a cap on the higher salaried employees. I'm saying that would be the closest.
Which there's not, you're saying there's not that many that would affect.
The higher salaried employees primarily focuses on directors, not field personnel, not first responders, things like that.
I mean, I think that we need to, at a time like this, just with the state of,
Yeah.
you know, where we're at competitively, like, for us to be hiring good people long-term, you know, I think you have to take care of your employees. So promises are important, but I also think that we need to be competitive in the market to get good employees to come to Branson or to hire good employees that are gonna stay long-term, because the more turnover you have, the more cost you put into that employee every time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and, you know, inflation costs, everything else that we're looking at with the country, I think it's important that we're competitive. My only concern, because not knowing our budget and our state, I mean, again, I'm new on the committee, is just knowing where those funds are gonna come from. I would just like to understand where those funds come from, exactly.
Sure. What I'll do is I'll go back to option 2, if you will, and reconfigure that in such a way that reflects pretty much what we had last time, or what we had last time. And then the additional amount for others, you know. Now, do you want to differentiate that between field-related personnel or just 7% or 7.5% for everybody else outside of public safety?
Well, it sounds like the feedback you received was more from the field personnel.
Right.
Did you, on option 2, did you get feedback with that max cap on higher salaried employees? You're saying that mostly affects directors.
Right.
Did you get feedback from directors on
I
that?
have not. I haven't taken it to, you know, this was just some calculations
Sure.
that we put together, just so that we can go in a general direction.
Does option 2, the way that's worded, is the 5,000 cap on public safety also?
No,
Okay.
it's not.
So
Just-
number 2 would be public safety just stays even Steven.
Right,
The field operators would receive the 7.5%, and the hired paid employees would be capped at 5, and we don't know how many that would affect or what that dollar amount would be.
yeah, I don't have that right in
Yeah.
front of me. That's one of those where I could have easily included that, but then it would have had names and dollar amounts and all that fun stuff. I don't think that would go over well.
Well, let's talk about you then. How much is your, oh, just kidding.
250.
Let's hear from, Summer has a few things she'd like to share.
Forgive me for speaking for most of the employees, at least that I know.
You do not need to be forgiven.
No one is going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Let's please not make the same mistake that we did last year and call it a cost of living stipend, because it does not cost me any more or less to live than it does anyone else. And I think that is where a lot of the sour taste came from last year, with the difference in the percentage, is what it was called.
I see,
And
which makes a
that-
lot of sense.
Yep.
And when we made these decisions last year, I don't know that we were all fully aware that we're gonna run at a 8% cost of living increase nationwide, right? So that wasn't that
But that-
paramount as it is today.
that's what it was referred to, and I think that's where a lot of employees got
My
got
cost
upset
of living
because-
went up just as much as the next guy's.
Exactly.
Very,
So-
very good point.
Not looking a gift horse in the mouth, but let's not make that mistake again.
Okay, so Jan, if we remove Summers out of this,
Yeah, because if they can, anybody who complains, we just move them off the list.
that's right, and so we have one more savings right here.
Anybody else want to talk?
Come on up.
So real quick, I don't want to take a lot of your time, but just listening to the conversation, again, I, echo what Summer said. That was the sourness in the whole thing was the cost, the way it was worded anyway. And in Jan's conversation today, he's put a pretty heavy emphasis on public safety and the importance of public safety, and it is very important. But I'd like to plea a little bit for the utilities department. If I didn't have folks, and Jan mentioned it, he mentioned about the plant personnel having to be here on a 24 basis. We can't shut down utilities. We were essential. We had to be here to keep things running. We had to be here to provide safe, clean drinking water and treat the wastewater that was coming from the COVID patients. There was a lot of unknowns out there about what COVID does to the wastewater system. Our employees were exposed to all of that with a lot of unknowns. There was a lot of uncertainty with those employees, a lot of stress that was put on those employees. To say that, I just want to plea for the importance of your utility department. We can't simply walk away from the treatment system and let it go. We had to have people here. We had to have people here to provide water to the hospital. The hospital had to have clean drinking water. We commonly received phone calls from citizens, even when we had water main breaks. Said, hey, you can't have my water off. We've got COVID going on. I have to keep things clean and all that. We received the concerns. I just want to put an emphasis on our utilities department, and I didn't feel right sitting back and sitting in my chair without doing that. I understand the promises that were made last year. I fully respect that. But again, this goes back to the question of retaining folks. It will help retain folks. Will it help attracting new folks? No. What's going to help attract new folks and keep folks here and save dollars on the expense that it takes to put towards hiring new people, the hours that goes into that, the training that goes into that, is going to become more competitive with our salaries and also keep in mind the compression that it comes with it too. So again, I just wanted to stand up and say a few words, and I appreciate your time. So.
Before you sit down, here's another guy giving up his, we're going to make money. Number one, I appreciate and respect you for standing up and sharing what you think. Summer, thank you very much. It's more and more encouraging when we get to hear input from employees and how you feel, because nothing's more, this committee and the board really needs to hear the feelings that are out there. Jan does his best to share the feelings. Summer, thank you for raising our awareness. And I think I'll tell you what, it's very, you've raised my awareness on this issue. It's very valid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jan, real quick, field-related employees, is that what Kendall's talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and when I say field-related, I lump, plant operators, parks department, field employees, all of those. Frankly, those areas that we really struggle to maintain, keeping them full. There's a lot of competition, like Kendall was saying, there's a ton of competition that we're losing to the outside.
Yeah.
To industry for other positions, just simply for salary, and that's the thing that we'll talk about it more whenever we're talking about insurance. But I think at some point we need to balance things so that employees can make options.
Here comes savings number 3.
And I will discuss some savings, but first off, Jan, thanks for the transparency in saying you had no director feedback in what's being presented here. I want to address your comment about competitiveness and remind everybody, last year, the Board of Aldermen gave everybody a 7% across-the-board pay raise. That 7% realized in the police department 2 cents an hour above Taney County deputies at the entry level for us. They have a take-home car. To try to remain competitive with the people that we're competing against, Ozark, Nixa, not so much Springfield, I cannibalized 3 positions in our department to put an extra amount in officers' pocket above and beyond the 7% to try to get us competitive. Mayor, you've talked about promises from last year. If we were to put this stipend in everybody's pocket right now, in the police department, I have 4 open positions, 3 of which are supervisor positions, a lieutenant and 2 sergeants. So there's money on the table that's never going to be spent if we're factoring current authorized strength in these dollars, right? Part of that promises, if I remember correct, was to right-size salaries until we could get the study that Jan was going to produce so that we could look at the whole of the city and try to right-size those salaries over the corporation.
Thank you, Chief. Anybody else want to forego their stipend? Come on, I need some big salaried people up here.
I'll go. Mayor, you want to go up there? You start. So, just to reiterate, I think from a, similarly to what Kendall spoke to, and we all appreciate what emergency services do. I mean, their life's on the line every day. It's a serious job that frankly, in particularly the lower entry-level, positions, they're probably not compensated enough. You'd say the same for so many departments out here, parks, utilities. So in that regard, I'd say IT is a little in better shape, right? But I think the issue with morale, with the employees that I heard, mainly nobody that I know had any heartburn with a police officer and a fireman getting a stipend higher than everyone else. And again, I'm just talking to you straight and honest. Yep. It's the employees that do the same job as the non-commissioned or non-firefighters in another department that got half the amount for doing the same job. That it just didn't make any sense, and frankly, it hurt morale. How do you explain that? I mean, it was difficult, and so I think everyone was extremely fortunate to get what they got, whether it was 5%, 10%, it doesn't matter. Everyone was grateful, and that uniformly I heard from everyone. But I can't pretend we didn't hear other things as well, and I just wanted to make that known. In the IT department, it's very difficult for fire and police and emergency services to do their job. We were here every step of the way. Now, I'm not out, and my guys aren't out in the field getting shot at, and there is a difference in those jobs, 100%. We don't argue that. But we are here putting in the hours, and we were here through COVID the whole time. Now, we did work remotely as well, but we worked. We didn't, anyway, that's my 2 cents. I'll stop. You can have my stipend. Thank you.
Chad, I'm going to start off with thanking you also for feeling comfortable to speak up and share your thoughts. Very much appreciated. If I heard what you just said, the police, fire, the public safety employees that work in the office, you're comparing that to the people in your department that work in the office?
Not necessarily just my department.
All departments?
All departments.
All offices. You're saying that there was discussion that there might have been some imbalance if we're comparing those that are out in the field versus those that were in the office?
Correct.
Okay.
And if I'm misspeaking, by all means, anyone's welcome to come up and share their thoughts.
I will agree with that to a point.
Okay.
I consider dispatch as part of the field, if you will, first responders.
Sure.
Highly stressful.
Yep.
Highly, high turnover, lots of issues, not based on character or anything like that, but one of the most challenging positions that we have here at the city of Branson is a dispatcher. And, we've got a couple of dispatchers that have been with us for 20-plus years. Their character they must be made out of brick or something, I don't know. But because, everybody else, it's a tough job. It's every bit as tough as any first responder.
I completely agree with that, Jan, 100%.
So from what I'm hearing is the directors are okay with a cap if it gives more money to the people that are in the field, the people that need it more. Is that the consensus from you guys, kind of, or?
I can speak to that. I'd be just fine with that.
I would too.
So number 7 seems like the most logical. I don't know, I wasn't on this board last year, so I don't know what was promised, but in all fairness, number 7 looks like it's more on par for what should happen.
Well, it's closer, but it does have a $5,500 cap.
Yeah.
So I'd want to go in and remove those.
Just on the first responders.
First responders and field-related employees.
So Chuck, what I heard you say was option 7, it would be the same 10% for first responders without the cap, 7.5% for field-related employees with no cap, 5% for office employees.
And I can strike the Public Safety Administration.
Yep, scrap that and up. So Chuck, I think you're spot on. I think that would be, Jan, do you think Chuck's suggestion is what we're all hearing?
Yeah, we'll have to find some money for it, but I'll do that calculation and bring it back.
Kevin, any thoughts on that?
So I think the calculations, like Jan said, will change it, and we'll be sort of, again, in the position where we're adding more to it. I'm okay with whatever this group wants to recommend to the board, I guess, at large, and I'm okay with any of that. I think the one encouragement I would give our elected officials and all of our board and is, be careful what you promise, because here's the math of all this. So whatever this ends up costing, it's going to be more than the grant. And then when and if we decide to go self-funding, we're going to have to find that money too. And so I would just encourage our folks to be careful. I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do, and I support it as a member of the HR committee, whichever direction, because those promises were made. But I just think we have to be careful, because that's what drives people crazy when they say, my God, why are you, So I'm absolutely in agreement with any of those that this commission wants to recommend to the board. That's my 2 cents for future.
And Kevin, just so you know, and it is a different topic, but we are having some discussions on how to fund that insurance or health insurance so we can go self-funded.
Fantastic.
Because, that just mathematically, it makes
big deal.
a lot of money, a lot of sense. Yeah. Lisa, any thoughts? You're good? Good.
I will do the calculations, and would it be appropriate to distribute that via email, or?
For timing purposes, we need to get the money in their pockets, right?
And we were hoping, we have it penciled in, that's what my comment was going to be, on September 27th. That's our next board meeting. So we were penciling that in in 2 weeks, right? It'd be a week and a half, but a week from Tuesday. That's
Is
where we
there
were timing. We were
legally, technically, keep us out of Alderman jail? If Jan redid the calculations and forwarded it to this committee, could we make because the recommendation would be going to the Board of Aldermen, which is September 27th.
Right, correct.
So if we could get that information to be able to make the recommendation to that board meeting,
So we would not be able to do that by email, just as a consensus email. That's what you're asking, and that would not. But if you wanted to go into, I mean, you could provide you the information. If there's something off from it, you could look at it. But you may just want to very specifically move it from here as you're talking about number 7. I don't know if the ARPA funds, less than the ARPA funds, so you've got 6,000, over 6,000 already under, so that will absorb some of that offset. So is there a dollar amount, I guess what I'm saying, so if it's 20,000 out of general, or out of regular budget, it won't be just general, but out of regular budget, would that be good? And you would move it forward if you had that information? Is there criteria?
I'm afraid that it's going to be larger.
But could you say, hey, we're comfortable if we don't exceed a certain amount? I mean, he's kind of got some of those numbers up there.
Okay, so if this committee was comfortable with a not to exceed, then when it goes to the alderman on the 27th, the alderman at that point will just make the decision and we'll just pull the trigger.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you like number 7, and you pull out whatever caps you don't want on it, and say, we would go with number 7 with these caps eliminated, and not to exceed out of, above the ARPA funds of $20,000, or whatever you're comfortable with saying, then you could move it forward that way, is what I'm saying, if you're at that level.
Or at least, is there a downside to us just recommending option 7 and letting the board say, oh, no, we didn't know it was going to be that expensive, so we're going to kill it? Because if we say not to exceed 28,000 and it's 29.5, then that means we are not recommending it to the board. So does it make sense to just recommend it to the board and let them do what they will with it?
Recommend it without a cap?
Correct.
Yeah.
That, you know what I'm saying? Because if we do that and we miss it by $27,
You're
we're
right.
going to be going, well, shit.
Is there a way to get those numbers before this meeting's over?
No, not with these kinds of changes.
Yeah, it will probably take 20, 30 minutes for me to do it, but
That's something Kimberly could do right now, or?
I can look at it. I mean, if we want to take a break.
Well, not only take a break, but we could go to our next topic and then come back to this one.
Yeah, but I'm doing all the presentation.
There's a problem. I'd be okay with letting the board decide. I mean, the number's going to be what it's going to be, and let the board decide on accepting that.
I'm okay with that too. I think that our job as a committee is to make a recommendation
Yeah.
for the board, and it's ultimately the board's job to make that decision, so.
Okay.
Okay, let's.
So
move- let's go with
number
that.
7, but I, forgive me for just a little clarification. Number 7, and Gina, can you take prolific notes?
Well, this is recorded.
Could we still have a cap on number 7 that's just higher? I mean, say if you have a director that's making $150,000 a year, you know, does he need $15,000?
We can put, well, that was going to be
That's
my
probably not
question.
popular in here right now, but.
That was going to be my question. Do we want to cap directors? You know, we had a little discussion on that, but do we want to do that? I can do whatever you request. We can do a 10,000.
Could you perhaps run it both ways, Jan, so that if we're making a recommendation again to the board, we have 2 board members and a mayor on this committee, and could you cut it both ways?
Sure.
And let the board decide?
Sure.
And maybe that's a way to keep us from having to
Yeah,
shoot from
okay.
the hip here.
Okay.
I think that sounds perfect.
Good idea. Okay, so are your notes clear?
Can
Yeah.
I just,
Sure.
it sounds clear, but we have to be careful. That ordinance is a budget amendment with numbers. That's
can't-
what you're going to take to the board. So,
We can do a fill in the blank.
yeah.
Well, we've done it
I'm just
before.
saying, I'm just saying that the approval of this is a budget amendment to move these dollars to the specific funds. So some money will go to the public safety, some will go general, some will go utilities. There'll be a dollar amount shown on that to be moved. So then the money can be spent. Now, we did not clarify last year well in that ordinance. I didn't think it was in the whereas clauses, kind of, maybe.
Right.
But we might want to get this a little bit more detailed in there, but.
Okay.
This was not clarified well is an understatement. This was the bill that I reluctantly signed because it was not clear.
And what we have to show is the transfer from the ARPA, when it's over the ARPA, you have to transfer from the ARPA, but you're
Sure.
going to have transfer from somewhere else.
You bet.
To make up ARPA. So every fund, then if it's off, you have to fund that money, which will come out of utilities, public safety, their regular budget, potentially, or a reserve. I don't know. That would be up to Ben, or a question. But I'm just saying, when you don't know those numbers, it will be hard for finance to figure and get them in those accounts,
Yeah,
right?
well, they can start off with Summer, Kendall, Chad, right? Okay, are you clear? Do you have any questions, Jan, on, for clarity?
No, I will look at it with and without caps for the higher earners. Just put it that way.
Yeah. Very good. Okay.
Okay. The next item is just an update on our staffing study. Chief alluded to that. The one thing, just so you understand, this is a brief one. The one thing that we want to do is we want to make sure, we've gone through and we've requested from directors what their input is with respect to staffing needs. We did that. I presented that to this committee time before last, and we discussed it. We prioritized those and made the recommendation to move forward. After the fact, some directors said, hey, I didn't get a chance to give my 2 cents. And fairly, they didn't. But the rationale was we were focusing on the high turnover positions. The areas, departments. We were looking at parks, public works, police, and utilities. That's where we're bleeding staff. The other areas were not bleeding. It's not terrible. It's not even bad in some situations. You do see some occasional turnover, and frankly, some turnover in an organization is a good thing. But all that being said, our focus was on that. So we are currently, with the outstanding requests, we're somewhere around 45 positions that have been requested. Clearly, we're going to have to go through and do some work, because that would be somewhere, I'm going to estimate roughly, if we look at an average salary of $42,000, we would be looking at roughly $3 million in additional payroll with respect to benefits and things like that. I don't believe that is what the board wants us to do. And so, the one thing that we haven't been doing is putting on our city manager's hats. That's the one thing that I think I appreciate Ben Hart very much, because he challenges all of us to put on our city manager hat, think from a city manager perspective, and realize, hey, just because maybe I've got money in this account or that account, that kind of thing, does it make sense for the entire organization? Because we work together, we don't work independently, that kind of thing. So that being said, we've got some work to do with respect to ferreting that down and going through the budgeting process and all that. Our intention is to have all of this put together and assembled in such a way, we're collecting salary information as well. We're looking at all the different elements that we need to do in order to be competitive. There's a lot of factors in here, and I gotta tell you, Kimberly Cooper has done yeoman's work here and has done an outstanding job. She's not here today. She is on a retreat with her church, doing church stuff today. So I miss having her around, but it's one of those things that I want to give her all the kudos in the world. She's done a fantastic job with this. But that being said, we've got a plethora of salary information to sort through yet, that we've gone through a lot of it, but we still have more to do. We've pulled MML data with respect to every city of any size in the state of Missouri. We've got a plethora of data from Grandview, Missouri. In Grandview, they did their study, and their study then reflected the Kansas City area, and it reached over into Kansas and such like that. So we're going to be able to incorporate all of that from a comparative salary data. The other part that we want to do, that we want to kind of highlight with respect to today, and that has to do with internal equity. For me, internal equity is an important function of what this salary study should do. Should this position here be paid as much as this position over here? And so what we've done is we've used the SAFE methodology that we incorporated in our last salary study. And we've articulated it here that you give a scoring value for each of these areas for training ability, experience, level of work, human relations skills, physical demands, work conditions and hazards, independence of action, impact on end results, and supervision exercised. You go through those particular factors and you allocate a point structure to each of the positions. So obviously, you look at something like the chief of police. Chief of police, from an overall perspective, the supervision extended, he's going to have the greatest span of control of any employee in the city, outside of the city administrator. The impact on end results, he's going to have a significant impact on end results. Independence of action, work conditions and hazard. Police officers and firefighters, their conditions and hazards are significant, as are public works and utilities positions. Those that are dealing with wastewater and things like that, those are things that we take into consideration, those conditions. So we apply a scale to all of these things, and we're coming up with a value so that we can develop that internal equity based on the conditions of the work. So that being said, we're going to have this ready by the 29th of September to roll out to directors first. And then we will then at that point take it for any budget committee meetings and things like that and see how things fit and go from there.
Jen, I want to share a few thoughts. I have had a paradigm shift, and when you make a statement like, for those of us that have been here for any time, we know what our budget is. And to make a statement that, boy, to get us on a level playing field, we're looking at a possible salary increase of $3 million. On the surface, I'm going to tell you that doesn't work. That just absolutely doesn't fit. So then the question on the table is, if the salary study says we need this kind of an adjustment for our city staff, and the budget says, which it does, there's no flipping way. I have been working with the board on the paradigm shift of every year we try to cut the budget and cut and cut and cut. We're looking at about a half a dozen big rocks to move that will increase the revenue to the city versus continually cutting. So there's about, like I said, there's about a half a dozen big rocks that we're currently working on that will have a dramatic impact to the revenues to the city, because from my logical point of view, we have to pay the staff competitive wages, right? I mean, it's just, from a business mindset, you can't go in the marketplace and say, I'm going to pay less and I expect to have good people and long-term employees, right? So as you're doing that study of what the number needs to be, we're going to be hearing pretty soon of what some of the rocks that we could, the levers we can pull as a board to increase our revenues. And I just wanted to share that. Anybody else on the committee have any comments on how we get from A to B?
I will say that for a number of years, you know, we've looked at things very myopically with respect to a budget number that, frankly, I didn't have tons of confidence in. And so to that extent, that's the area where I really can't say enough about Ben Hart, Baker Tilly, and what the enlightenment they've done for our organization to be able to say, you know, some of these positions that we've been clamoring for, we can actually afford some of them. And that's the part where I feel really encouraged. Now, the other side of it is, okay, how far do you let that pendulum swing? You know, we have to do what's right. We have to right size in an additional side, but it also compounds itself with the additional compensation and things like that. I mean, money doesn't grow on trees. We got to figure out how to make it work. To your point, we need to make sure our revenues are in a place where we can sustain the number of employees we have, because whenever we hire somebody, it's not just for this year, it's for next year, the year after, and it's their benefits as well. And those are things that have a residual long-term effect. You know, what we do today can affect the outcome of our budget 15 years from now.
Correct.
So those are the things that I think, in that respect, we're going to focus heavily on those really high-priority positions that we've already identified. And then, with Ben's help, fit in those ones that make sense from a business perspective and that are overall, we as an organization, as directors, when we sat around the table for the first time ever talking about budgets, we can come to that decision together. You know, we may say, you know, Chief, I get you need this position here. I'm willing to give up my position over here. Or something along those lines where we have a cooperative rapport around a table.
Lisa?
And I want to reiterate that because I think that 45 position sounds, it's large. We all know that's large. But that's first, let's just throw it on the table number. So they will be putting emphasis on more important, and they'll be lined out like that. So I think everybody always, as with capital, it's the same way. There's a wish list. Those numbers grow and get big fast. And so I think everybody will come to the table, I have no doubt that's coming. Jan has some of those numbers that will rise some of them because he already knows if they're short those positions or something. Obviously, that was the study that we were looking at. So those are going to be the ones that we are like, we know we're short those positions. You know, so I just want to emphasize that 45 positions, I think, as is, we could throw out I'm sure the directors their capital wish list too, and it'd be pretty large.
Sure.
And they are categorizing them, they are putting them in their levels of importance. So as Jan says, I just want to make sure that, you know, we're not just going to come and ask for the Santa Claus to come, and we all realize there's a budget behind those numbers.
Yeah, and I guess I was referencing that, boy, you've already given up your salary. I was referencing, I believe it was this year's budget, when it was in the newspaper, that we were $1.4 million short of balancing our budget. And in the same year, we authorized, I believe it was a 7% pay increase, right? Which equals $1.4 million. So we went from, oh my gosh, we can't balance the budget, we're $1.4 million short, and in the same year, we approved $1.4 million additional salaries. So that was part of the point I was getting to. And so that transparency that Jan's talking about, everybody sitting at the same table, all the directors having the information that helps them make better decisions, I think this will be all-encompassing.
Well, and at that point, that's where we, amongst ourselves, we don't air dirty laundry out, or we don't typically have dirty laundry, but we don't air it. But we ask the really tough questions. Do you really need this, or is
Yeah.
this just a want? Could you make other adjustments and achieve the same results? You know, I'll be a hawk on that kind of stuff because, you know, just to add positions makes no sense in my book, even though I am HR. But it's one of those things that, you know, we have to make good business sense across the board, irrespective of what the budget looks like.
At the end of the day, they're taxpayer dollars.
Exactly.
Kendall, you got something to say?
Appreciate another moment here. Again, I just want to, I feel like your topic, Mayor, on, I guess, a philosophy of how you're viewing the salaries and the departments. I just want to put up another plug in there for the Utilities Department. You know, we are a self-funded department. We have water and sewer rates. Those water and sewer rates go towards operations, maintenance, and capital, small capital. Our tourism dollars go towards our large capital items, which we coordinate with Public Works Department on those tourism dollars because they share in those. But as a utility, you know, we have the responsibility of maintaining operations. As you've seen in the last couple of years, we cut off capital, and you've seen the effects of that. We had emergency purchases we had to make. Equipment fails. It's a necessity to keep this vital system for our community running. Again, come October 6th, I'll be presenting to you guys the rates, what I believe it's going to take to continue to make our utility department a healthy department. And as part of that is working with HR and the salaries adjustments and what's going to make it competitive to keep, retain, and attract folks in here that's going to help us make ourselves even more healthy. I think that's key to our community development. If you look across the nation, you look at areas, you can look at Jackson, Mississippi right now. There's parts of their water system that's been under a boil order for over a month now. And a lot of it has to do with infrastructure issues and staffing and similar to California. And so we're doing our best to try to keep this community up and running, supplied with clean, safe drinking water and taking care of our environment with the wastewater side of things. Again, we have an opportunity to adjust rates and to make the difference here for the employees, which is our most valuable resource that we have. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, I'd like to move on to talk about update on city insurance and broker selection process. Let me preface this by saying for 2021, in our negotiations that we had with our carrier, we had a guaranteed renewal cap of 9.9%. I presented that to the board in a study session a few weeks ago with respect to, that equates to about $350,000. Our Anthem rep characterized it as a good thing for us, and I didn't think it was a good thing. I think, ultimately speaking, last year, our claims data information, our ratio that we had to claims to premiums ratio was not terribly different than what it is this year. And last year, we had a -1% renewal rate. And this year, they were telling us our renewal should have been 28%, but fortunately and good for us that we are capped at 9.9%. I presented that to the board, and proceeded to get the board's direction to do an RFQ for broker. We had some feedback from a broker that wasn't particularly happy about that. And so ultimately, last year, what we did in order to drive that price down, we did an RFQ, a request for qualifications for broker, but then it kind of morphed into an RFP, a request for proposal for actual rates. So we got down to 2 finalists for the broker position, and we said, okay, as a tiebreaker, go out and get us your best rates. And that's what they did. Now, the issue with that is, you know, inherently there's the game and how it's played with insurance is that the incumbent broker is the only one that can get the rates, the renewal rates from the carrier. And so that leaves all the other brokers kind of their hands tied with that in that respect. And when it comes to that kind of thing, last year, I felt like we didn't have full cooperation from our carrier. They claimed they did, but clearly it was one of those where emails were going unanswered and things like that, where I didn't feel like we got a fair shake, that we got a level playing field for all of our brokers to go out and compete, excuse me, for our best interest. Irrespective of that, the competition, in my perspective, drove the prices down. We had claims to premium ratio similar to what we had this year, but yet we see a -1% for this year, and now we see a 9.9 cap for next year, for 2023. My effort to do an RFQ for broker was just to reenact what we did last year. Let's do it the same thing. So at the end of the day, having upset some folks along the way, what I want to do is, what I did is I retracted that RFQ, and I want to present an RFP for specific qualifications or levels and pricing with respect to insurance. Now, in that respect, there's got to be a tiebreaker in there, because otherwise, you know, what happens is the incumbent broker gets the renewal, beats everybody else to the punch, and goes to all the different carriers, and then all the other brokers can say, well, I can match this, or I can match that. So in effect, we're not getting the true negotiating power that I feel we are deserving for competition when it comes to an RFP. So what I've done in this respect, and I bring it to this committee for your recommendation to move forward, a specific parameter for evaluating an RFP. I want to be able to cover specific things that save the city money that wouldn't necessarily be focused solely on rates. So those are the things that I want to cover today in that respect. Just kind of an outline, if you will, of the request for proposal. What I want to do is I want to get the best overall cost respective to offerings with options for fully insured, partially self-funded, and fully self-funded. I want it across the board, all those options. From a PPO perspective, for fully insured, I want plans that reflect what we currently have. A zero deductible, thank you so much, a zero deductible, a $1,000 deductible, and a low HSA, the lowest cost HSA plan that we can get. The other thing that I want to do is come up with a fourth option, if you will, for employees to be able to take let's say, and I can't think of what it would be off the top of my head, costs or anything like that, but something like a $5,000 or $10,000 deductible. You know, if I'm an employee that doesn't use insurance, I can opt for a $10,000 deductible, and maybe I can take the difference in that premium as pay, that kind of thing. Gives me options. As an entry-level employee, that may be a good option for me. If I'm somebody who's got a family and I've got sick kids and things like that, it may not be a good option. So I want to be able to provide employees with options. You know, and the basic things that I want to do is I want to make sure we have zero copay or charges for preventive health, which that's going to be pretty common anyway, preventive health. I think, you know, I want to push the envelope a little bit. And currently, we have a $30 copay for telehealth, Live Health Online. And for the HSA plan, it costs you $50. There's some plans out there, it doesn't cost a dime. So I'd like us to get that kind of plan where it doesn't cost a dime. So that way, if somebody really needs a medication or something like that, they get on their phone and boom, they can get it ordered real quick. And all they do is they have the prescription cost and the telehealth is built in the plan. That's what I'd like to do. And a big one, something that I think is important for us to help with the process of driving down costs is opening up the market to which we get health care. Right now, we're stuck, I shouldn't say it that way, bad way, let me retract that. We only have Cox Health. It would be nice if we could open that up and get Cox and Mercy. You know, we've got some employees that have real challenges with Cox and their billing processes. Frankly, from my perspective, my staff, you know, whenever it comes to different billing with respect to Mercy, we've had billing issues with Mercy as well. So it may be just inherent in the industry, that kind of thing. But the point is, we want to give employees options. So that's what we want to look for in this RFP. Our prescriptions, we want to be able to have prescription plans based on a fully insured plan that would reflect similar coverage that we have right now. Currently, as part of our plan that we have, that's something that saves the city money, and it's focused on with the broker that we have COBRA and Retirement Administration Services. Now, the thing about it is, the federal government has a lot of specific requirements on notification when it comes to COBRA. When you've got a staff of 5 in HR, that becomes a fairly daunting task whenever you've got a lot of turnover and things like that to be able to send out all the necessary COBRA notices and such like that. Having a broker or whatever firm that would help us with this, having that means a cost savings to the city. That means that Gina is focused more on the things that make sense for the city of Branson and for its community versus sending out COBRA notices and doing all that excess kind of thing. Flex spending and HSA administration. In my mind, that's an integral part of our medical insurance coverage as we move forward. For anybody that's got a deductible plan, they want to be able to set aside those deductible dollars pre-tax so that they're, you know, let's say you're at the 20% tax rate. Well, you just save 20% on the dollars that you spend on healthcare if you put money away in an HSA, or flex spending, I'm sorry. HSA is similar. With an HSA, that becomes an integral part of an employee's long-term healthcare needs, because you can set that money aside. The difference between flex spending and HSA is flex spending, you can only roll over a maximum of $500 into the next fiscal year. With an HSA, whatever your balance is, you can roll it over. So if you're somebody, and whenever I meet with new employees, I usually say things like, had they had HSAs when I was in my 20s, I would be a gazillionaire by now, because I just don't use medical insurance, and I would be packing all that money away. And the cool part about it is the HSA dollars, that then becomes another investment account for you. You get, our current HSA is held by American Fidelity, and if you get more than $3,000 in your HSA, then you can invest that into mutual funds and things like that and grow at a higher rate than just normal investments. But the cool part about that is, even when you get to that point of retirement, that becomes another form of retirement income for you. And when the city is making a matching contribution to that, that means, because the city makes a matching contribution for HSAs to offset the reduced premium. So an employee gets the same benefit regardless of which plan they choose. So in that respect, that becomes an additional form of retirement for an employee, which is really kind of a cool thing. Our dental insurance, we've gotten some feedback from various folks that our current dental provider has been kind of putting a squeeze on different dentists and things like that. So we want to make sure that we have the best plan for everybody, that, that we have a plan that where the dentists accept that kind of dental insurance, because we don't want people to have to go file separately and that kind of thing. And we want some basic coverages and things like that. Our vision coverage, we've been pretty myopic with our vision coverage. Essentially what we have is, it's a layaway plan for glasses. It's not truly insurance. It is just a prepayment plan where you can then get frames and lenses and things like that. Honestly, I think there's a lot more options out there. We've been with Delta Vision for a number of years. That's an area I think we can probably enhance our benefits to employees and save money, because this is one of those things that it is an optional plan for employees, meaning the city doesn't contribute anything for vision coverage. It's solely upon the employee. Other things that I want to see have to do with, customer service, call centers, things like that, where customers, for employees can get questions answered quickly and easily. Wellness. The one thing that I've heard, I've been here since 2014, and every year I've had questions. Does our wellness information migrate over to our carrier? Well, it may, but are we seeing net results from, hey, if I jump through this hoop, I go see this doctor, I sign this form, I do this, is it reflected on my cost of insurance? I can't say that. I want to be able to say that. I want to be able to tell Lisa Westfall definitively, if you do this and you do this, it will affect your costs, irrespective of what our internal charges are and things like that. Smartphone apps, we currently have a smartphone app, so that's going to be for our information that we want. I want to make sure that we get the same thing, irrespective of whatever we're having, so that if I need my plan ID card, I can pull it up on my phone and show it to whomever, that kind of thing. And here's one where we're getting into an area that I want expert consultation on setting up funding mechanisms for self-funding. I want somebody that's been through the wars, that has dealt with city councils and things like that, knows how to advise people. I want things set up in such a way that I can rely solely and dependently on this mechanism so that we're safe. That we make sure that we're able to deliver self-funded insurance the same way we would at a cheaper rate than we would fully insured, that kind of thing. Low-cost third-party administrators, when we do fully insured, we're paying for all the elements for what we would normally pay for self-insurance. We're paying for a third-party administrator. We're paying for reinsurance, meaning that reinsurance is one of those things where we pay a set dollar amount. Currently, it's kind of hidden in our premiums, but we pay a set dollar amount for insurance that covers costs for somebody that hits our plan really hard. Somebody that has $150,000 in claims, that reinsurance says, you don't count. And that's part of the issue that we had whenever we got our renewal. They hadn't cleaned up all of that stuff out of that reinsurance side of things. We had a number of employees that, had more than $125,000 in claims that were still showing up as affecting our claims. And that was not right. And that's another issue that $125,000 used to be $100,000. It migrated up, and I didn't know about it. It was hidden in there. Those are the things that self-insurance helps us stay on top of. Because, when you get reinsurance, if you knock it down, let's say $75,000 versus $125,000, you've saved yourself a bunch of costs when it comes to what your claims are going to affect for next year. Now, you could have issues with your reinsurance, that element of it, but that's the minor part of it in comparison to the overall scheme of the premium. The one thing, and to move on, I want a consultant who will guide us in the future on our claims and give us ideas on what we can do with respect to adjusting our insurance versus, I think one of the biggest points that I want to try to avoid is let's not necessarily look at reducing employee benefits quickly. If it gets grossly out of hand, at some point we may have to, but I don't want that to be the first, horse out of the gate that says, okay, well, our costs are up, let's reduce benefits. I don't want to go that route. So I want somebody that can give me good expert consultation on that. I'll need legal advice for HIPAA information, things like that. And again, part of the melding of the RFP and the RFQ is I want clear evidence that this organization has saved money for other clients, not just retreads of the old insurance plan. I want real savings for us. And then, obviously, I want really good customer service. That's one of those things that I want to make sure that our employees are fully taken care of and such like that. So that's going to be kind of the overall parameters of what I want to do in an RFP. And like I said, it melds the RFP side and the RFQ side. I just wanted to get your feedback on it and say, do you think, in your opinion, I'm going in the right direction?
Well, I'll tell you, I believe I can summarize what you just said. What I heard you say was, we have several goals that we want to accomplish regarding our insurance. This is obviously in your wheelhouse, Jan, right? You're the one that we all look to for advice. We want the lowest premiums because we're responsible for taxpayer dollars. We want the best policies for our employees because we owe it to them, and that's something that we've done. And when I say the best policies, it includes several things you mentioned in here. If they can have a larger copay and lower premiums, whatever those options are. We need to be sensitive to the fact that when we look at our financial reports, our health insurance is running us $3.3 million.
Right.
That's a lot of money.
Right.
So we want the biggest bang for our buck. We want to take care of our employees. And at the same time, high level of customer service. That's the big picture, what we're looking for,
Right.
right? And I heard you say, everything that falls into those three categories is what you've gone through.
Right.
Is there any other comments, suggestions from the committee?
I was just going to mention, Jan, thank you. I appreciate from the board side, from the committee side, I'm sure our board appreciates it as well, and certainly for employees, but looking to increase options and reduce costs, because those are two huge components, again, that you said many times. I think that's important. The other piece, and again, being on this HR committee for a number of years, I've seen the dance about getting claims data, and I've seen the dance about you trying to get from a broker information about going self-funded. And I really have to say, I appreciate you continuing to push through on that, because it seemed from my perspective to really be stymied at a lot of turns. And so I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you looking at moving forward. I think ultimately for the city of Branson, for the employees and for the budget, it's going to be a much better to be self-funded. But every year, I can't, it's a broken record. Every year you're trying to get claims data to get that out there, and you can't, because our current broker is holding it. So I just think they need to our broker needs to understand they're on our side and not on Anthem's side. I asked a meeting, Mayor, when you were gone, the last meeting we had, and I said, what's the last time you've had a broker and the same provider with one client for 30 years? It just doesn't happen. And so I think that it's important for our brokers to understand they're representing the city and not the other way around. And so they're never going to do that until you do what you're doing. So thank you for that.
Now, let me be very clear about a couple of things. We had issued the RFQ in a timely fashion that I think would have fit with a late October, early November open enrollment period, which would give my staff adequate time to do the necessary changes with respect to payroll and all that stuff. This changes things. We're clearly pushing this back. But I refuse to be victim of, a friend of mine has a great quote, tyranny of the urgent. I refuse to be a victim of that anymore. We'll do what we have to do to get the parts in place to make sure that we get the best pricing for everything, so that we are able to, if we're here working on Christmas Eve, I know Gina will kill me, but, I'll do what I have to do to make sure that we're getting things done for our employees. Those are the things I think are very important for us. So just as a full disclosure, we're going to be behind the 8 ball here. We're delayed by a couple of 2 or 3 weeks, and this is going to put a crimp on us. But again, I go back to I refuse to be subject to the urgencies of things, because we'll make it up. And I refuse to be, focus on fear-mongering and threats and things like, if we don't do this, this is going to happen, that kind of thing. We have to look at it. We have to be strong going through this process and understand the end result is going to be a big payoff for us if we get the things in place that we want.
Jen, is there anything this committee or the board can do to help you with these timing issues that you're up against?
Well, yes, there is. Being flexible, like today, my anticipation when we first set this meeting was to go through RFQ results. Well, we're delayed. So if this committee can be flexible to a point where we can meet off-cycle with respect to not more often than once a month until we get this put to bed, that would be very helpful for me. Because at the end of the day, I really want this committee's input so that the board has full confidence in what we present.
Anything you want to add?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Anything you want to add, Chuck?
I appreciate your presentation, Jan. This is all, I think you're going the right direction for sure. As a board member, I'm 100% for this. If there's anything we can do to speed up the process, just let us know.
The one thing I'd like to do, and I know this is making sausage kind of thing, I'd like to, Chad, if you would pull up that scorecard, I'd like to talk about that briefly with respect to, I would like to get your agreement on this as being the criteria by which we evaluate RFP submissions. The first part, for years, I've broken down my evaluation process into the negotiable and non-negotiable elements. The non-negotiable things, like if you, like if you can't provide online enrollment as a primary means for enrolling employees, you don't qualify. You're done. If that's not part of your mix, you're just done. It doesn't have to be you yourself. I'm open to third party. Right now, American Fidelity does our open enrollment, and that's okay. And they do a great job. Must disclose any claims of adverse action. If you have a claim for adverse action, you don't disclose it, you're done, that kind of thing. Those things are non-negotiable. The things that I consider are negotiable are the things that you see down at the lower part. The lowest price for medical insurance. I weight that as a 10. And then I go through and I evaluate that based on a 1 to 5 scale. So let's say I have 5 submissions and 5 different costs. Well, the lowest cost is going to get a 5, the next is going to get a 4, the next is going to get a 3, 2, and 1. It's that simple. I'll evaluate it that way. But the main thing I want to focus on is the weighting at this point, because we don't know what the scoring is going to look like. But the weighting, I want the lowest price and the best coverage, Mayor. That reflects what you were saying earlier. I want, and I want something that provides a clear path to self-insurance. I want folks, whoever's going to make any presentation, I want that as part of that mix. I want the lowest price dental insurance, the best coverage in dental insurance. That's important because, in that respect, employees are picking up the dependent portion of that. That's important for our employees, that they get the best at the lowest price. I want the lowest price life and AD&D coverage. That's, currently right now, we have all of that through Anthem. I want to continue that. We cover employees up to their salary, the $1,000 above their salary, and that's life insurance. And that way, in the worst case scenario, if something happens to one of our employees, that pays out what their annual salary would have been one time. And that goes up to, currently, it's a maximum of $150,000. In-house COBRA administration. If you're in-house, I'll tell you, our COBRA administration we have right now is weak. Our employees, our former employees don't like it. Our retirees don't like it. And I think an in-house proposition would be better than a third party. I just give a little extra credit for in-house. I missed the big one there. Savings for our insurance is not predicated on reducing employee benefits. That's got to be first and foremost by any presentation. You're going to focus, because right now we pay 67.25% of all dependent coverage, and we pay up to 100% of employee coverage. So that's a significant cost for our employees, considering the kind of plans we have. And you get down to the various things, we've got a timeline we want to hit. We want to have renewal by January 1. That's going to be important. I don't want January 10th or 15th. I want January 1, that kind of thing. I want something that Gina spends a ton of time, Gina and Kimberly spend a ton of time on, and that's reconciling the bills to make sure we're getting charged appropriately. They get it wrong frequently. you know, they don't always understand who's left employment and who hasn't and that kind of thing. And they spend a lot of time doing that. That's a service that somebody can provide for us. That offloads a lot of their time. What do you say, probably at least 8 hours a month?
Yes, at least.
At least. You know, when you talk 2 people, 8 hours a month, that's a cost savings right there, month after month. In-house human resources consultation, helping us with, you know, anything, Affordable Care Act, all of that stuff, making sure we're up to date with that. That's going to be a key function. All the different things, wellness tracking, vision insurance, it's low cost. I've got that structured as I've set out that I think I've weighted the most important ones as a 10, and you get down to the bottom, third-party legal advice, that's a 1. Anybody can get that. That's easy. There's going to be some of those things that you're going to, you know, when we go through and do the evaluation, you would score. If you did it in-house, you would score there, but if you did it third-party, you wouldn't necessarily score. So it balances it, weights it to that where you've got the in-house services, that gives you a much more weighting in that respect. So anyhow, I would, if you have any discussions, disagreements, or anything like that on this evaluation tool, I would appreciate a vote on this and recommend this that this is what we evaluate.
Where'd Kevin go?
There was a car fire in front of his house. He had to leave.
Oh.
As you heard the sirens.
Oh,
Oh, so, Lisa, I don't think we can vote. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a quorum.
Oh, we can, okay. My 2 cents is, again, this is in your wheelhouse. I'm going to ask anybody on the committee if they'd like to make any change. What you're asking us to do is to vote to approve. This will be your process.
yes.
Do you have any input or comments on
I
it?
think this, having competitive rates on health insurance in long-term for the employees is a great way for it's another recruiting tool. So if you can lower that and increase the package that you're presenting an employee, it's great. I think this is great work, and I would approve it.
Okay.
Chuck?
I'll second.
Lisa, you good? Okay, so you're wanting a vote on this, so all in favor of accepting, you need to,
We have to make a motion. I move to approve as is.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving this as is, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it.
Okay.
Further, I'd like to make one statement, and I know Kevin isn't here. Kevin raised the question that I've heard in the past before of how uncommon it is to have a broker and the same carrier for 30 years. Some fairness in that statement is, my understanding is there have been times where our broker today has brought the board alternatives with other carriers, and it was the board's decision to stay with the existing carrier, even with the broker brought lower premiums from a different carrier, but the board chose to stay with the current carriers. Is that correct, Jan?
I recall a couple of times in particular where they were slightly lower rates with a different carrier. Nothing huge, but, you know, slightly lower rates. And the rationale was, why put everybody through that transitional process for that amount of money?
Yeah, so the transition is something to consider.
Yes.
Right. I'll also say that one thing you mentioned is the customer service side is a very important factor, right? I mean, I'm not sure where you would weight the customer service side. I'm assuming it would be less than the premiums and the benefits, but pretty high up there compared to a lot of other factors.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so you have your vote?
Got my marching orders.
Yep. Anything else you need?
I think ultimately, this is, like I said, I could use your help in navigating through this process. Whenever we do get the results from the RFP, I will educate you on the process of how we evaluate them, how we evaluated them, things like that, and bring that to this council for input.
How does the committee feel about that? This is a large ticket item on our budget. This is very important. Jan has expressed his concerns with the timing issues. How does the committee feel about meeting on a more regular basis or as an as-needed basis versus once a month, which is our scheduled meeting, to help accomplish this?
Yeah, we have 2 meetings this month, right? We have one on the 28th?
Yeah.
Okay, so for this committee to help you move this process along, feel free to request meetings that don't fall on specific scheduled dates.
And I will ask Gina to send out her normal emails and such. I do apologize for the lateness of the notification on this one with respect to the completed agenda. I found out about the ARPA stipend stuff on Monday, so it took me a while to get things put together.
Very good. Does that conclude your presentation?
It does.
So I heard you say you still need one Wednesday. I knew that was up in the air because.
Well, I think it's on the books. We'll take a look at it. I will make sure this committee knows what we have, what we need.
So it's tentative, just so everybody's calendar, it's tentative on the agenda for next Wednesday, if I'm hearing you correctly. That would be a normal.
Yeah, that would be the normal time, but frankly, we won't get RFP stuff back.
So I didn't know if you needed that. That was what I was asking.
Probably don't need it, to be honest with you.
You probably will not need the Wednesday 21st meeting?
Right.
Okay. Well, it's in my calendar, so if we're going to cancel it, well, just let us know either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for being flexible. I appreciate that very much.
These are important. Any closing comments, Jan?
That's it.
Any committee closing comments? Anybody in the audience have anything they'd like to share? Other than Kendall, Summer, Chad, and Chief? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
We have motion second, all in favor, say aye.
Hi.